I always tell therapists that I supervised in the past or that I worked with, I said, less of you, more of them. That's what I always say, because we're not there to talk. We're there to listen and to redirect and absorb and point out things. But we're not there to tell them our story. That's not the right move. And if we start to do that in a clinical session, you have to check yourself, because the tables have turned and that client is now the therapist. So you have to be on guard. So I think listening is just a part of honoring and respecting that person.
Mindbend. Non-ordinary and extraordinary states of consciousness for Mindbend Creative.
Dr. Jeff Mcnairy, Chief Medical Officer at Rhythmia Life Advancement Center. Thank you for joining me on Mindbend.
I'm so excited to talk to you. I've been looking forward to this for a while.
You're a Los Angeles native.
Yes.
And you spend most of your time living in Costa Rica, is
Correct.
That right?
For the last 10 years, I've been in Costa Rica.
Yeah. How's it been back in LA on this trip?
It's wild. It's like a lot's changed, to be honest.
Yeah. It's been a while since you've been to town?
Yeah. Okay. Especially the West Side. I haven't been to the West Side in a long time, and it's a lot different. There's a lot going on over here.
Yeah, it's I'm 4 years in Los Angeles. I still feel like I'm new.
Yeah.
The thing that I really appreciate about living here that I didn't anticipate was how beautiful the land is.
Oh yeah.
And I live in Los Feliz now, and being close to Griffith Park and being able to hike there and get out into it is a total blessing.
Very cool.
Grateful for your time today. So many things to cover with you. How did you get into psychology? What led you down that path?
Well, I was studying at UCLA, getting my master's in public health, and I worked at an OBGYN facility within the UCLA Med Center, and I was doing a lot of research on reproductive health and mostly Latin American women's beliefs surrounding reproductive health. And I really liked it, and I was getting into the health side of social services combined with anthropology and the way women were viewing their empowerment versus what the government was telling them to do for Medicare and Medicaid and all these different things. And I said, I'm, instead of just managing the nurses and the doctors in this clinic, I'm going to go to medical school and become more empowered in this field. So I went back to UCLA, got all my sciences. Then I applied to medical school. I got into 1 out of 50 that I applied to. That's kind of how it goes. And then during that time of getting ready to go to medical school, all the doctors came up to me and they said, you shouldn't do this. You should get out of this while you can. I'm like, what are you talking about? That's like crazy.
Yeah.
Because I've been in this for a while. And they said, well, our malpractice insurance is like $500,000 a year in the OBGYN department. And we get sued 1 out of 3 deliveries. And it's just a nightmare. And that's when managed care was starting to take over California. So you had to get clearance from insurance to do any procedure. And they said it's just a nightmare, and we're all trying to get out of this field.
But to clarify, you had an aspiration to be an obstetrician?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I was going to do. And because I really liked reproductive health, I liked the whole mix of different beliefs in there, social beliefs, cultural beliefs, medical, all that together was really cool. And so I thought, I was studying some psychology as an undergrad a little bit. I was a medical anthropology undergrad. So I kind of had a little psych in there. And I thought, I want to change the industry in some way, because I was noticing that our women clients were coming to the OBGYN clinic with trauma. And a lot of them had unresolved issues that they had just faced. And the doctors would just give them some antidepressant meds and just say, go see a therapist. That was it. And I thought it was kind of shallow and just didn't really address their needs.
Which doctors were they?
The OBGYN docs.
Okay.
Yeah, and they're not, they go through a psych rotation in medical school for a couple weeks, and that's it.
Yeah.
And so it's not really appropriate, in my opinion, for them to prescribe psych meds.
But they're able to.
They're able to. And again, there's exceptions. Some are great at it, right? But overall, it's like a gap in the services provided. So I thought, I want to be, because with my master's in public health, I learned how to administrate and run health policy and programs and things like that of hospitals. So I thought, I'm going to go get my psych degree, my doctorate, forget med school, and I'm going to try to change the way that mental health is addressed within a clinical medical setting. That was my goal. So I applied I said, forget medical school, I'm not going. And I got into a doctorate program in psych. And it was during that time that I worked at a rehab in Malibu, kind of working the night shift because I was studying, called Passages. and I was just an entry level guy. And then the owners found out over like a year that I was this guy who had masters in public health. I was studying, all these things, and they needed a director because they'd fired the guy, and they hired me to be the administrative director of this huge rehab.
After a year on the night shift?
Yeah.
In what capacity were you working at the clinic or the rehab center?
At the rehab, I was just at the nighttime making sure the people that were staying there just were staying in bed and sleeping. And I was just up reading and writing and doing my doctorate program.
Okay.
So it was kind of funny. Like they just said, hey, we've noticed you. We see that you might have the temperament for this. And I know they knew I wanted to run healthcare facilities eventually. So they said, why don't you start right now? So I said, all right. So I switched the night shift to the day shift. I was still in school. By that point, I was almost in my postdoc hours. So it all started there. And Passages was a very interesting place because it was so expensive per month. It was like one of these ridiculous, high-end places that we had so many different types of therapy that we could do. So it wasn't a 12-step facility. It was like a holistic place. Like we had Chinese medicine, we had body work, we had spiritual counseling, all this kind of more esoteric stuff going on. And I thought it was pretty cool because I'd never been exposed to any of that stuff at UCLA, and I really got into it. And then this guy came in as a client named Gerard Powell. He was from Pennsylvania. And he was just this really rough customer. He was aggressive. He had a lot of drug and alcohol problems. His main drug was Demerol. So that's a surgical-based opiate, really tough. Yeah. He had alcohol problems too, family issues.
Most of the people there had opioid addiction?
A lot of them did. The whole range. A lot of alcohol addiction. Yeah, there's some opiates in there. Just everything you'd ever see, like at a rehab, pill addiction, everything. So he was so difficult. Like when he came in, I always assigned the new guest to a treatment team because I would do a clinical interview for like an hour on a new patient, then give him a treatment team. And the treatment team was about 12 therapists of different types. And I did this for him like everybody else. The next day, these 12 therapists come in my office and they say, if you don't kick this guy out of here, we quit. I was like, yo, that's crazy. What are you talking about? There's a rehab, And they said, he's not ready. He's aggressive. We don't want to work with him. It's just too much. He's too much of a handful. So I said, okay, I'm not going to kick this dude out of here just because you guys can't handle him. So I'll work with him myself. So for the next 60 days, I did daily work with Jerry. And we really connected, and he did very well, actually. And he got rid of his Demerol addiction. He never went back to it. But when he discharged, he moved from Pennsylvania to Malibu. So if you've got a drug and alcohol problem and you're on the fence, I wouldn't recommend moving to Malibu, especially when you have limitless funds like he did. He was a very successful guy in the medical industry. So for the next 5 years, I put him in my private practice, and it's like we beat our heads against the wall. Like he just could not get sober.
You finished school and you became a practicing psychologist.
Correct.
Okay.
And then I had a practice in Pasadena at a hospital called Las Encinas, and that's a psych hospital. So I did my rotations there, and I had a practice there in an office. And when Jerry finished that rehab, I put him in my practice, and he was so demanding that I had to taper off. Once my clients were done with my therapy, I just didn't get new ones because he was so much work, this guy.
Well, the agreement was that he was going to come out and you were going to be a personal physician?
Yeah, be like his psychologist.
And that you understood like what that might entail. You had an understanding of how demanding that could
totally
be. Yeah.
And so I think the reason I got into psychology, to answer your question in a roundabout way, is that I just knew that the field was limited, and there was certain protocols that I was learning that I don't think were that effective. I think they stabilize people. Mm-hmm. I think meds can stabilize someone, or inpatient can stabilize them. But then once you get out, then what? And there's families that really struggle with their kids or their spouses or their friends who they don't fit into this criteria, and it's really expensive, and they just don't know what to do. And they end up strung out on drugs, or they overdose, or they end up, without a house somewhere on the street. So there's just a lot of high risk behavior. So I thought there's got to be a way to address these issues in a clinical way that's more effective. So that's why I went into the field.
And you went into psychology instead of psychiatry, though.
Correct.
And that was a decision made because you could still work with the mind, but you weren't interested in working with prescriptions?
Exactly.
Overtly. Okay.
That's the reason.
Got it.
Yeah, because I'd seen so many problems with those prescriptions,
Okay. You've laid the the foundation for the story of how you wound up in Costa Rica, but I don't want to get there just yet.
Got it.
I still want to talk about the power of psychology, the study of the mind,
Perfect.
holding space for that exploration.
Absolutely.
And communication specifically.
Cool.
Because do you think it's safe to say that communication is foundational, fundamental to the healing process for people, especially as they endeavor to work with a psychologist?
Definitely communication's big.
Yeah. So what do you think makes for fluid communication? What do you think helps people communicate? In your experience in observing multiple clients, people are coming from different backgrounds, different experiences. What is integral to healthy communication?
Well, aside from just having the mental capacity to do so, aside from that, it has to do with trust. Got to have trust with the clinician, because a patient shows up triggered with personality disorders, all kinds of anxieties. And if they don't feel comfortable in that room with the therapist, they're not going to communicate effectively. So for me, it's that.
Trust is huge.
Trust is the biggest.
And how do you establish trust with somebody who might have tried before, might have never had somebody that they felt safe with? Like, how is trust arrived at?
Well, I studied psychodynamic therapy in my graduate program, and that's we call it Freudian Model 3, and it's related to a concept called object relations. And what that means is that as the therapist, I remove my own, as best I can, my own sort of emotional agenda that I might be going through in that moment. I kind of remove it, and then I open up in an empathic way to allow the client to project onto me. And then they start treating me like, the issues that they're dealing with. Like, they might treat me like their dad. They might treat me like their mom, like unresolved stuff. And they start to hand it over to me in a process that we do. And then I feel it. And I feel the sadness, or I feel the anger or the resentment or whatever. And then I go, okay, this is where this client is at. So I'm holding it with them, this sort of emotional process. And then what I do, instead of just doing what always people do to the client, which is, why are you so worried? And they shut it down, like, get a hold of yourself. This is ridiculous. And they kind of maybe don't address their friends and family, just don't address it. I do what's called a corrective emotional experience. So I tell them, I understand how you're feeling. I can tell that this is upsetting to you. Let's look at some strategies to do it. And they're like blown away by that, because while I'm holding their emotional issues, they have a breakup from it. It's like they're almost like relieved, because I'm holding this hot potato in a way. And we go back and forth with it. But as I hand it back to them, it's a little bit corrected, a little bit added onto in a way that's helpful. And that's called the objective third. That's what that concept's called in Freudian Model 3. So I give that to them, they give it back, and we do that. And that's what therapy is in that framework. So that's how I can get someone to trust me, because they feel that I'm emotionally invested in their process. Now, the danger of that for the clinician is that they leave holding the bag. Yeah. So that's a very important part that the therapist can't do. The therapist has to redirect it at the end, and then check back in with themselves after the session is over. And that's very important to do. If they don't, then they get overwhelmed and they last 5 years in the field and they retire.
Yeah, I don't know about active support that's out there for psychologists and therapists right now. Do you have an idea of what that support system looks like?
We're encouraged to have supervision with another therapist. And it's not a formal thing, because once you're licensed, you don't have to have supervision. It's kind of like a pre-licensure sort of schooling thing, where you have to have advisors and supervisors, and you talk with them, you figure out what's going on with your clients, how you're doing. But as soon as you get out of school and you get licensed, that ends. But the Board of Psychology recommends that you still seek it out. And so I personally have that right now with a therapist that's here in Los Angeles. And I talk to her every so often, and she talks to me, and we kind of do it to each other, and we process what we're going through.
And that's keeps you sharp, keeps you grounded.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like I've been in the field about 30 years. There's no way I could do that if I didn't have somebody to kind of process with me, or if I didn't understand that concept that I explained, where I hand it back off to them in a corrected, healing way. If I just held it for them, it wouldn't be good. I learned the hard way. I actually used to just hold it for people. I was in an internship here in Beverly Hills, and it was a really tough clientele who had a lot of darkness and a lot of problems. And I just thought, I was a young trainee intern. I thought, okay, well, I'm just supposed to make these guys feel better. So I'm just going to hold all their pain. that was not the right move because I became a disaster. My family's like, what's wrong with you? You look angry. I'm like, yeah, I am. I don't know why. I think I don't like psychology. I was kind of like already getting burned out over it.
These are skills that a lot of people would benefit from having some familiarity with to handle conflict in their own relationships, their own families. Yes. And I not everybody obviously is able to go to medical school or become a psychologist, but
correct.
I hope that maybe we're able to emulate that somehow.
Yes.
And maybe a very base form of that is understanding that it's important to listen in a healthy way. So we've talked about communicating. Let's talk about listening and the role that listening plays, not only in your practice, your education, but maybe in the work that came that we haven't quite gotten to yet. But listening, what do you think of when you think about the therapeutic value of listening?
Well, I just think that so many people these days are not listening, and people are just in their head and they have their own agenda. So if you're listening to someone, actively listening, you're engaging with that person at a deep level because you're allowing their process to be a part of what you're involved with. And you're like, without listening, I think it's almost impossible to have meaningful conversation or meaningful communication. And the therapist, I always tell therapists that I supervised in the past or that I worked with, I said, less of you, more of them. That's what I always say, because we're not there to talk. We're there to listen and to redirect and absorb and point out things, but we're not there to tell them our story. That's not the right move. And if we start to do that in a clinical session, you have to check yourself because the tables have turned and that client is now the therapist. So you have to be on guard. So I think listening is just a part of honoring and respecting that person.
Your aims in your own vocational journey, your vision for that, growing up in Los Angeles and having the interest that you did and wanting to affect positive change within like the world of obstetrics, the world of childbirth and medication and consultation within that space. Did you ever envision practicing or operating outside of this country?
Never. Never in a million years did I picture that.
Yeah.
I thought I was going to be in Los Angeles my whole life, just kind of trying to change the system, which is not easy to do. But I was younger and kind of more maybe delusional. I don't know. Just
none of us can prepare for where life's going to lead us, but you were led to relocating. And did that happen quickly? Because you got to the point, and you're sharing with us today, that you met Gerard Powell, you were working with him, and the opportunity came for you to work in more regular, consistent fashion. And we know that you eventually wound up working with him in a professional capacity at Rhythmia.
Yeah.
But how much time transpired between that time at Passages and the work that began in Costa Rica?
Once Jerry and I worked together for 5 years, so that we met in 2009 and we went to about 2014-ish. And in the July of 2014 is when we both experienced plant medicine for the first time.
Okay.
And Jerry experienced it first in Costa Rica because he was, after 5 years of therapy and him really, really trying, and to be honest, he did a lot of work. He was like he was an ideal patient, but he just couldn't get past his triggers and his behaviors, and he was really miserable and upset inside. So he was getting suicidal again, and he had been suicidal a couple times. He had a couple attempts as well before I met him, and he was feeling that way again. And I said, let's just chill a bit on the therapy. Let's take a break. Go on a trip or go see your family, do something. And he said, all right. And he went on a vacation to Thailand and with his girlfriend. And then after that, it didn't help him any, by the way. He still stayed upset. So there was a woman that he had met through Passages that was, I guess she was a shaman. I don't know what we would call her, but she was somebody that had knowledge of plant medicine and things like that. I don't know if she was like a lineage-based shaman, but she was somebody that was knowledgeable. I call those people plant medicine providers, usually. And she challenged Jerry to try a plant medicine that would actually turn him around and get his life back on track. And it sounded really far-fetched to him. But he just took the challenge because he didn't know what else to do. So he went down to Costa Rica where this particular shaman lived, and he signed up for a week It was up in this rural, kind of dilapidated old house out in the jungle. And he went through this process of plant medicine, and I was not down there with him. I didn't even know where he was, to be honest. He was down somewhere, and I don't know, he was traveling. And he came back from this thing a totally different person. And he told me what happened. I was like, that's shocking. I've never heard about that. What are you talking about? I didn't believe it.
At this point, do you consider yourself more friends and colleagues, or was there still like a kind of distance, a safe distance of practitioner and
There was
client?
still that practitioner client. Yeah, because I was still working with them,
Yeah.
And when he came back, this different guy, in the rehab world, we say that someone's in the pink cloud when they are newly sober or newly happy with something. And that's a short-lived period where they're kind of like not prepared for the dip that's going to probably come of reality. And that's where people relapse a lot. So when someone's in a pink cloud, you have to be really cautious as a clinician to help them still use and build tools and build a stable base so they can continue that vibe. So when he came back, I just said, oh, this guy's in the pink cloud. That's what I thought. And he's going to flip back into the same old dude probably in a week. So, but then he didn't. I was like, this is interesting. And then 2 weeks went by. And then Jerry told me, he's like, hey, I see that you're asking me a million questions. Why don't you just go down there yourself and try it? So I was like, I don't know, man. I'm hesitant. Like I'm scared. Like I don't have a drug or alcohol issue.
Right. Did you think you needed to try it?
I didn't think I needed it.
Yeah.
I didn't, because when you're getting your doctorate in psych, you have to get 65 hours of individual therapy yourself during that process to know who you are, right? If you're gonna be working with people
and be safe for others.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'd already done all that, and I thought that was enough. I was kind of like a little sort of insulted by the comment that he thought I needed, is what he said. So I'm like, I don't know if I need it, and he says, well, I'm going to come with you, and we're going. So he just booked a flight. So in July, at the end of July of 2014, him and I went down there, and I did it. And I was like totally freaked out beforehand, totally scared, worried. The shaman freaked me out. The whole thing was scary to me. But it was incredible, and it completely shifted my life for the better. And that's where Jerry and I decided that we needed to have a place where people could go to that was safe, licensed, and not a dirty, dilapidated old house in the middle of the jungle, but like a facility that we could do this the right way. So that's how it happened. It was very fast.
And that's what became Rhythmia.
That's what became Rhythmia. So we opened up our doors. Well, I moved down to Costa Rica like 2 months later, but I was coming back and forth to LA.
2 months later, you were down there.
2 months later.
Was the understanding still that you were working in a kind of role of personal physician,
That started to separate and stop with him.
Yeah.
But I still had clients that I was working with at my practice. And so you can't just cut them loose. That's abandonment.
In Los Angeles.
And
there probably wasn't as much Zoom.
There wasn't that yet.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so I'd already kind of tapered it down over the years working with Jerry because he was so demanding time-wise. So I had like a handful of clients still. So I just slowly over the next year, going back and forth, I just tapered them into other therapists, which is the right way to do it. So then I was there full time after that for 2 years working on the license to open Rhythmia with the government, with the Ministry of Health, before we actually opened.
Okay. So you were learning on the job training, right?
Yes.
About everything that's involved in the legality of establishing such a place.
Because it had never been done before. Like there's no medical approval at that time for ayahuasca in the world that we knew about. And we had searched everywhere to try to see if there was a template that we could follow, and we just couldn't find anything. So even though there's a lot of ayahuasca centers, like there's places in Peru and stuff that are not illegal, but they're not medically licensed by a governing board of healthcare people. Okay. And so the Ministry of Health of Costa Rica allowed us to apply, and we met criteria. And it was a very involved, they didn't know either how to frame it for us. So we worked with them collaboratively. And then they came up with an idea for licensing, and we agreed, and we kind of helped shape it. And then we got our first license in January of 2016.
Okay, 10-year anniversary.
Yeah.
Without getting too far deep into the woods, can you encapsulate a little of the details of what that licensure sort of entails and looks like?
Yeah. So in order to consume a product in Costa Rica of any sort, whether it's a coffee or an ayahuasca drink or tea, it doesn't matter. That product has to be approved for human use. And so we had to basically prove through research articles and different testimonials and things that it was a safe, viable product that was indigenous based. And it, as we know, ayahuasca is mostly from the Amazon basin of South America, but there's pockets of it in different areas of Central America. So it does grow in Costa Rica, even though it's not plentiful like it would be in Colombia or Brazil or Peru. And so because it was a native plant, that also opened up certain loopholes for us to get licensed.
Just because the government was more understanding that this is kind of part of who we are going into this?
Yes, exactly.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So that's fundamentally pushback that you didn't receive there that you might have received elsewhere.
That's right. Yeah. If we were like in, I don't know, any other country, like Iceland.
Right.
Yeah.
I was going to say Iceland. Yeah.
Oh, you were?
Just to go in a different direction.
Yeah.
So let's talk about setting.
Sure.
We hear a lot about setting,
Yes.
and obviously the setting where you are geographically is just extraordinarily impressive, and meaning that it causes an impression. And I'm sure you have people who go down there that have never been to that part of the world before. So tell us about what it means to be doing this work in that geographical location. Give us some of the intricacies of what you've noticed and the effects that it connotes to people, like immediately and lasting, in a lasting way.
Well, when I used to live in Hawaii, and I worked for the Department of Health there way before passages and all that. And what I noticed on the Big Island in particular is that that's where the active volcanoes are. And when you get off the plane on the Big Island, you feel this groundedness right away. It's like a magnetic pull that your body feels, and you just feel like rooted in the land. Like you immediately connect to nature. And so Costa Rica, the area we are in, feels exactly like that. And it's a blue zone. So it's an area that meets certain criteria. There's only, I think, 6 or 7 blue zones in the world. One of them is like Okinawa, Japan, and because of the high content of certain minerals. And it's also to do with lifestyle. So people that are mobile, like, they walk a lot, or they're on horses a lot, or they're just, they're not in cars, put it that way. There's not like driving everywhere. They're mobile. Their family unit is a certain way. There's clean air. There's clean food. There's like farm to table sort of stuff. And there's also like just these linear sort of longitudinal things that line up that I don't really understand that have to do with like a magnetic center. And I think Sedona has some of that too, at least they say. I've never been there.
Are we talking about ley lines?
Yeah. Ley lines. Yeah. So there's some of that down there. And there's this vibe that's really cool in the area. So people feel that immediately, but I think it has to do a lot with the people of Costa Rica, because the people are amazing. They're so just happy. And, they do those studies every year. Who's the happiest people in the world?
Right.
Kind of Swiss tend to win a lot for whatever reason. But I think Costa Rica is usually second or first often. And it's because their family system is structured in a great way. They take care of the elderly. There's very little abuse of children. Of course, it exists everywhere, but it's less. And women have rights. That's really, that's a big part of the criteria, and over to reproductive health. And there's also just healthy environment. Like there's no hunting allowed in all of Costa Rica. It's banned, and it's an eco-friendly, country. So it's just this awesome vibe that people feel when they get there right off the bat.
And the land itself, is it right on the coast?
Yeah, it's about 1.5 kilometers off the beach on the Pacific side, like northern Pacific side. So we're in this gated community that's right next to the beach. So we take them to the beach and stuff on a couple days of the week. But we're in this jungle sort of zone. It was a boutique hotel that we bought and converted it into this center, and we built a maloca. That's where we serve the plant medicine. And we have all these other modalities. We have 36 events per week that people go through, so it's not just ayahuasca. There's breath work, there's yoga, there's all this stuff.
I was going to ask, does everyone who comes to Rhythmia participate in plant medicine ceremonies?
I'd say 99% do. Occasionally they don't, because they're supporting their friend and they just don't qualify
so
medically.
That's a possibility.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Do they is someone in the support capacity able to enjoy other modalities or
Absolutely.
food
Everything.
or whatever? Yeah.
Yeah, they can do everything else.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the idea And I'm assuming that most people who are watching this or have come to this video or listening to this podcast have some familiarity with the idea of a psychedelic wellness center or retreat. Rhythmia is called a life advancement center. And when you say life advancement, what are you speaking to specifically?
We're talking about people having a soul merger and having what we call a miracle happen in their life. So it's a way to tell people that, you know, they've been living their lives dissociated. Most of us do, where we learned at a very young age that it's not safe to be who we really are. And that just comes out of just life circumstances. It doesn't necessarily have to be from abuse or neglect or abandonment. A lot of us are that way because of that, but there's, you know, I have a great family and be in school and be told that, you know, I'm too loud and the teacher, you know, punishes me. So I learned to be quiet, but my nature is more gregarious and outward. And I suck it up and I hold it in. I do that my whole life and it's not really who I am. So I've lost touch with who I really am. And that leads to a lot of problems, especially in business and with families and our own self-understanding of like who we are. And so we believe that everybody is in that state in one way or another, and that we want to get you plugged back into the authentic you. But when you do that, trauma surfaces and unresolved emotions come up. And that's scary for some people. And so we know that's scary because Jerry went through it. I went through it at the beginning. And so we want to have a really nice environment for support so they can do that kind of work and go deep.
Yeah. When I think the term miracle has different meaning for different people, right? Like
Yes.
I have a certain feeling when I hear it because of my upbringing and
Sure.
things I experienced. So to me, I'm more wary of
course.
embracing that term.
Absolutely.
And I think that the term miracle cure has a certain stigma to it on its own,
Yes,
right?
it does. Yes.
But for you, it indicates a seismic shift in perception
Yes.
and a lastingness.
Yes.
Is that safe to say? Like that's what's kind of meant by saying miracle?
Absolutely.
Something that had been heretofore like thought impossible for an individual.
Yes.
Yeah. And there is follow-up from Rhythmia with the people that go through the program
Correct.
to check in and see how things are progressing, how that contextual shift has stuck or
Yes.
where they're experiencing problems. Are you doing that work specifically?
I am. And we have a 13-week aftercare program or integration program. And they log into an app. There's group therapy in there. There's individual counseling and coaching in there. There's also modalities they can do. There's videos and there's guided meditation, yoga, and they can get in contact with us and we contact them. So everybody gets a call 2 weeks after they leave if they didn't get what they came for. So on their exit survey, if they say, I didn't get my intentions met, I didn't get my miracle, I didn't get what I thought I was gonna. So we follow up with them. How you doing? Like, let's talk more. Let's help you. And then as those that did get it, 6 months later, we recheck in with them and we make sure things are going okay. But during that time, during that 13-week integration program.
That's baked in.
Very much so.
Okay, got it. The idea of having such a concentration of profound experience for human beings, like this container, the space you've created seems, I mean, it's a very singular thing, isn't it? Like
Yes.
I was trying to think of other analogs in the world, maybe like rehab centers
Sure.
potentially, right? But
Yeah.
and prisons, you
For
know,
sure,
right?
yeah.
But
A
where
prison
there's
done right.
well, but just a concentration of people that are experiencing something extraordinarily
Yeah.
profound or challenging,
Yes.
right? It doesn't even have to be like an adverse experience for it to be challenging, right?
Correct.
But I just marvel at how that's maintained year round,
Yeah.
year after year. How does the staff and everyone working to curate this container, how do you handle that much energy occurring?
That's a great question because that is a very big challenge for us.
Yeah.
And, we're open every single week of the year except for 1 week in December for the holidays. That's the only week we're closed.
Yeah.
And we are full a lot of that time. And we're never slow. I mean, in 2025, probably the lowest number of people we had in the whole year was maybe like 40 or something. And we have up to 80 and plus, 85, 90 even. And so it is a challenge because coming from my background in healthcare and mental health and managing and supervising clinicians,
One patient.
takes a lot out of you,
Right.
right? So the staff that we have there, we have some clinically trained, of course, we have nurses, doctors, coaches, things like that. But then we have a lot of these other staff, holistic staff, that are not familiar with how do you handle a caseload? How do you handle a huge patient base? So I am constantly doing supervision with the staff as well as our other managers. And we give them a lot of time off, like especially the team that works with the plant medicine. They have a lot of time off, and they don't work every single night. They might work 2 nights a week, and then maybe the next week 1 or maybe 3 sometimes. So we're trying to, make it so it's not so brutal, because it is tough. And some people have not been able to handle it. And over the years, they've just said, I'm out. Like, this is just too much. Because when you're in that environment working, your own things come up. And so it's very important for us to hire people that have already done a certain amount of work on themselves. And some people will say they have, but then after 3 months of Rhythmia working there, they're like a basket case. So we really have to be careful with that part of it.
Yeah. What have you learned in your time there about the best ways to make it possible for people to be in their power in this work? I mean, time off is obviously like a consideration of people's schedules, but like, are there things that you've tweaked along the way in your own process?
Well, I think, what I do with the staff is I'm constantly either training them in a clinical supervision, or we're giving them like a case conference meeting once a week where we're going over all the guests and how the guests are doing, but then how are the guests affecting them? And, people have learned over the years by working there that, that's my whole thing, is that I want to make sure that you guys are taken care of, because if you neglect yourself, you're going to be not doing what you're going to burn out very quickly. So I've learned that, it's interesting, because the extreme cases we get, like we've had lots of people that were in the past suicidal, and they feel like this is their only hope. Like they've tried everything.
Do they express that in the intake before they come down?
They do.
So you're aware of, as long as people have been forthright, as
Yes.
honest as possible.
Correct. Yeah. And occasionally people would not maybe disclose that, but generally speaking, it's such a safe environment that if they don't tell us on the intake, they usually tell us like the next day, because they're going through a lot. And we have eyes on everybody, because we want to make sure they feel safe in that process. So I've learned that all of my training, all of my background, all of my experience, I mean, we've had 22,300 something guests at Rhythmia, and then all my clinical training here in LA, it still doesn't matter what I say or think to them, to the client. It's like, I have to allow their own process. I support it and I point them in the right direction, but we do not do the work for that patient. We have to have a container for them to do it. And that's why it's so empowering. Like when I used to do therapy with my clients, half the time I'm trying to tell them, oh yeah, you need to get rid of that or do this, or like, that's kind of the modality, coaching them really. But that doesn't work, in my opinion, as effectively as it could. And we want to empower the guest to make their own awarenesses, their own shifts. And then we just lay out a bunch of tools for them to try. And if they resonate with one, like maybe they don't like plant medicine, they like breath work. Cool. Or maybe they don't like any of that. They just like being in nature, So we just try to help them figure out what works for them.
What do you think you've learned over time makes for a safe and effective ayahuasca ceremony container? I'm sure your perspective obviously has been informed by the practitioners, the people that have been brought in that you work in partnership with to present this ancient, sacred, powerful psychedelic.
Yeah.
What have you learned for a medically licensed facility makes for the safest, most productive, accommodating experience?
I love that question. That's a great question. So there's 3 things that are the main reasons in the world why people have a bad experience with ayahuasca or something goes wrong. Number 1, the clients themselves harm another client. So they get violent or they flip out. And that's the number 1 reason why somebody has a bad experience, because somebody hurt me or jumped on me or hit me. That is because most places do not screen their applicants very rigorously. So you might get somebody coming who's not appropriate, who has maybe a mental health issue that's very severe that doesn't meet criteria, or they might be still on their meds, and you got to be off your meds to do ayahuasca. And so we really screen our applicants big time. So you can't just show up there out of nowhere. You have to go through a clinical interview, a psych eval, like a verbal psych eval. It's more of like a mental status exam. So it's like easier. And then on the phone room with our sales team, they ask all these medical and therapeutic questions. So the clientele themselves are very safe people. And so you feel that when you're a guest. So that's the first thing. Number two is heart conditions that have caused problems in ayahuasca ceremonies. So we don't allow anybody that's had an open heart surgery history or has an irregular heartbeat it's funny because it's called an arrhythmia.
I was going to ask you about that too. It's interesting. Yeah. Yeah, it just happens to be, yeah.
So the in sync heartbeat is rhythmia. The out of sync is arrhythmia, not allowed.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny. So pacemakers not allowed, certain cardiovascular issues not allowed. So we just rule that out right off the bat. And then the third one is somebody's on their back and they vomit and they choke on their vomit like if someone was drunk and that happened. That's the third reason out in the world. And those haven't happened at Rhythmia because we screen people. So that's the biggest way to keep it safe medically. Now, we have a 4-to-1 or a 6-to-1, depending on the day, ratio of staff to guest in the Maloka during the ayahuasca session. So there's a ton of staff in there. And they're assigned, okay, these are your 4 people, or these are your 6 people. And so everybody has their people. And they're watching them, they're checking in with them. They're people are walking around too. We have hammocks outside and there's a fire pit and there's grass so people can go outside, and we're saging, and all the shamanic tools that are from these indigenous groups that we work with are all being used. So our medical doctor's on staff, he's on property, he lives there, and we have a paramedic at night who's doing rounds all night there. He's actually quite bored because nothing really ever happens to us. Thank God, knock on wood, So we just have a lot of staff there, and that keeps it really safe for people.
Thank you for going through that process. How do you bring in the practitioners? Like, what's that process like? And what have those relationships been like for you to help? Are you involved in that directly? Like, who's administering and just getting to know those people and learning about their understanding of the work they do? Because you're vetting the clientele that's coming in. I'm assuming that you're vetting your staff in a similar fashion.
Big time. And, it's interesting because it was easy to vet the medical team, because that was my background. It was easy, and they're all awesome. The shamanic team, the plant medicine team, was harder for me because I didn't even know where to start with them. So we've learned over time that, there's certain characteristics we're looking for in the healers or the holistic team. Mm-hmm. If they start to think, or they already do think, that it's their own power or their own abilities that are creating these changes, it's a red flag. So even though that might be possible, maybe, but we got to have everybody's ego in check big time, because somebody that's working in the healing arts unchecked can become a total narcissist. It can be dangerous.
Well, that's a legitimate part of this landscape. And that's harm reduction is an aspiration of this program specifically,
Yes.
Providing information as healthy and as accurate as possible
Yes.
about all kinds of modalities, all kinds of process that people can involve in towards wellness, right?
Yeah,
Achieving
exactly.
wellness. And it is a trope. It's part of the world of ayahuasca specifically. You see
Totally.
and you hear about people who go through one experience and then they feel like they're now empowered to administer to others or lead people in a way.
Yes.
And maybe they're still in a pink cloud, dimension. But
Yeah.
so I'm really interested about this process of getting to know.
So, for example, our best plant medicine providers are ones that we kind of homegrown from within. And we have a lot of people that worked in accounting and worked in the restaurant and worked in the cleanse. And one of them was in the nursing department. And they had interest in becoming involved in helping in the plant medicine ceremonies. So we trained them. And we have different tiers of training. We have just helpers, then we have assistants, then we have people that do the Waira, which is the healing stuff, and the saging and the lotions and all that. And then there's like an assistant shaman, then there's the shaman. So we have all these tiers, and you can't just walk in there and start serving medicine like as the head guy or girl. You have to go through all these steps so we can vet and figure out like how you're doing, what's going on. So we're constantly looking at these people, and sometimes they don't work out, and it's like they have to go, or they go on their own because it's just too much. Like Jerry one time told me, he's like, we're having a shortage of shamans in there. I want you to train and do that. I said, I quit because I'm just like, no way. It's a lot of work. It's hard. So the people that are in that, it's almost like a calling for them. They're totally into it.
I would imagine that it's a large part a calling, but it's interesting to know that people they have the opportunity to come up within the organization and explore whether or not that could be right for them.
Correct.
Maybe some people try it, but go back to a different role that they're better suited for.
Yeah.
Tell us about somebody on staff that you think possesses gifts that you really admire in terms of really connecting and facilitating healing in people.
There's a particular staff member that he was a guest speaker for a couple times before we hired him. And he was near the beginning of Rhythmia. He worked as a guest speaker, and we really liked him. And he would teach meditation and other things, kind of ways of thinking. And he was a meditation expert. He has a lot of books about it, and they're published, legitimately published, not self-pub. Not that that's wrong, but like big. He actually has a following and a practice, and he's very good at it.
And guest speakers is part of the culture at Rhythmia?
We have different people come periodically and teach a couple classes during the week.
Okay.
So we have Michael Beckwith from the Agape Spiritual Center. He's a business partner with ours there. So he comes. He was just there 3 weeks ago, and so he teaches the classes. So this one particular guy was doing that, and we really liked him, and we just always offered a job, but he just was busy doing his travels and working in his meditation. But eventually he came. And what he brings to the table is more of like a Buddhist philosophy that's mixed in with an indigenous sort of belief system because of his own background. And he's just very, very patient with people. And he allows people to have their own process within their work. And he was in India last month working with the Dalai Lama because he writes all the forewords to his book. So every time he comes back from being with the Dalai Lama, he's just this ball of energy, of light. And so I like to talk to him every time he gets back and just tell me what happened. Tell me what, So he's like a very inspirational person to me because I don't have that background. I have just more clinical, hospital, therapeutic science, right? So I think there's a good mesh between. His name's Ben Decker. So he used to live here in Venice too. And he was a part of that Full Circle. I don't know if you ever heard of that. It was like a church type of non-denominational spiritual center. So he was running that place with a couple other people. So he's like, he's just very versed in the spiritual side of this. And that's not my forte. I've learned through my life there. I grew up spiritual, but I just didn't have that. I was just the science guy, put it that way. So with Ben, I feel there's this great, enmeshment that he creates for the staff,
You talked earlier about techniques that you're trained in or protocols that you're meant to observe as a professional caregiver, doctor, psychologist. And part of that is getting care from another professional, right? So what are some other ways that you have implemented for your own wellness that aren't necessarily like following a professional protocol? Like, are there practices that you've learned, like as you've learned what it means to discuss or embody a certain idea of spirituality or communion with the divine? Like, are there techniques that have resonated for you and that you've embraced over time?
Yes, there's a couple things. One of them is really practical. It's just leave work at work. And my wife is always constantly on me to try to do that better. And so that's a huge thing because when you're trained clinically, you feel that you're on call 24/7 because, and sometimes you are, depending on where you're working, because you feel like these issues are so important because they're life or death for some people. And if you're the one in charge or responsible, you got to be available. Now that's a novice belief that I had when I was younger, but I've learned that you really have to leave work at work. And when you get home or whatever your downtime is, you have to really connect with yourself in that point. So that's something that's practical that I've learned there. But also the spiritual side that I've sort of picked up on for me, that's amplified me, is just to connect with something outside of myself. That is whether it's a higher power or an energetic shift or nature showing me signs or teaching me. And a lot of that has to do with the plant medicine experiences that I've had, where I feel like the plants are communicating to me energetically. And to be honest, a lot of it was Jerry, because Jerry's story was so impactful to me that I decided to just get rid of and just leave everything I was doing in Los Angeles and just commit 100% to this, because the whole program that we do is shaped around Jerry's own experience. The 3 intentions he did when he was on his first journey, and the miracle he got when his first journey. So this is a very interesting place that I've learned a ton just about how to connect with a spiritual version of me. Again, I'm not great at it, but it's something I'm learning.
It's often a life work for people, right?
Definitely.
That process.
100%.
I wanted to address a specific subsect of clientele.
Yes.
And the veteran and first responder community. I know that you were working within these communities prior to your work at Rhythmia.
Yeah.
You were dealing with suicidality in veterans and first responders, addiction, depression, PTSD, PTS. Can you speak a little bit about the experiences that you've observed, maybe relationships that you've been a part of or people you've connected with and followed up through in those communities?
Yeah. So to me, the veteran community is like one of my number one priorities for this center. And a big part of that is because these are very capable individuals who have just been completely neglected when they get home. And they've never been given tools on how to deal with their trauma. And the PTS condition that they come home in is unacceptable as the way that the ball gets dropped with them. So in the veteran system. So a big part of what we do, and through the research that I've looked at and the own data we're collecting, we're seeing that trauma resolution is a huge part of what happens with ayahuasca and with our program. We call it the Rhythmia way. And that program really helps people with trauma. And so we've naturally just had veterans kind of just gravitate to us. And when I met these guys and female, men and women, both men and women, I saw that they were so desperate to get it, but so guarded because they just didn't trust anybody. I don't blame them, because in the veteran community, I've learned that if you're not a veteran, it's kind of hard to work with veterans. Now, that's not the case completely, right? But there's exceptions. But I know that they really trust their own people. And I respect that. Because in the rehab world, someone with an addiction going through recovery, they resonate better with someone that's been through it as a counselor. So I've seen that, of course, in other arenas. And
that's part of the value of the meetings to begin with.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Exactly. So I think with the vets, I was going up to the Maloka at night during when the veterans were coming, and I would watch them, and because I was very interested in like how this was going to go, because we were a little nervous. Like, are they going to flip out? Are they going to have a flashback? Like, what's going to happen? So
early on. Yeah.
These are the first years of Rhythmia.
Yeah.
So I would be there, and they would just have the most beautiful experiences, just amazing. And some of them were, dramatic, but they felt the support there like all the other guests did. And I was able to when a veteran comes, I usually do counseling with them during the week. I sit with them, which I don't do with all the guests. I will if somebody's, amplified or having a serious issue, then I will. But with the vets in particular, I like to really connect with them because I want to make sure that they're getting what they need, and that their process can be so extreme sometimes, like in the world. And that's why they're hesitant to do it. That's why they just keep avoiding it. I don't blame them. So at Rhythmia, we've been able to create this environment where there's veterans on the staff. We have vets on the staff, and they're great, and they connect with the guests. And we have a veteran-endorsed documentary we did about special ops. Those guys came and went through it too. And so we have that to show people. And so we're actively working right now with a veteran organization that's going to bring special forces to Rhythmia. But we have lots of vets, not only special forces, lots of vets. And what they've done is they've finally gotten closure on the war. That's a big part of it, is getting closure. And that guilt they have and that shame they have and all that survivor guilt and all that stuff, that gets addressed very, very quickly in the ayahuasca process, in the Rhythmia way process. So for me, the vets are like the best example of like what this can do for a community. It's just because it's so extremely needed and it's so extremely helpful. And veterans that have had that experience, I mean, they're just the best advocates for it themselves because they have completely turned their lives around.
And you've learned by following up with certain individuals you've connected with,
Yes,
that their experience there has been integral to maintaining an equilibrium, a healthy outlook, healthy relationships throughout.
Yes. And we believe that, the Rhythmia Way program is a starting point. We don't believe that like, hey, you come here, you do this, it's a magic bullet, it's over.
Right.
We believe that it gives you a huge head start in your process, but then you have to start to, live the life and use the tools. And there'll be slip ups, of course, but now you have a focus and now you're not dissociated. Now you know what it feels like to be plugged into yourself. And now you can navigate your life in a better way.
10 years you've been open and things have evolved and changed and your process has been informed by successes and challenges. What do you imagine might be entailed in the next 10 years? And do you see facilities like Rhythmia being potential for other parts of the world?
Yes, I think in 10 years, we will be, or not just Rhythmia, but other places will be all throughout the world in different jurisdictions. What I've started to see, I'm sure you have too, is psilocybin retreats becoming more mainstream. It's wonderful, especially I know a couple in Jamaica that are really good. And the reason why psilocybin is a little bit more inviting for businesses is because there's much less risk in a psilocybin experience than an ayahuasca experience medically. And the medical side of the ayahuasca is it's a monoamine oxidase inhibitor. So the vine is an MAOI. So that's why it contraindicates with all these different things. So it's not quite as safe for everybody. So psilocybin tends to be very safe for almost everybody. So there's exceptions too. But I believe that as people become disillusioned, they already are disillusioned, as they become just fed up with the pharmaceutical industry and with the medical model that just stabilizes and doesn't get you healed and get you past people are just getting sick of it, and they're going to look for alternative methods. And just like what I always say is like the cannabis model, which was a grassroots demand for legalization or certain allowances, is what allowed that to move forward. Because you can't tell a mom that has a 5-year-old daughter who's with seizures that you can't use cannabinoids. That just doesn't make any sense. It's the only thing that was working. So that kind of energy is what got the cannabis model kind of moving down the road. And I believe that's what it's going to take for ayahuasca and for other plant medicines. It's going to take a grassroots push. And the problem in the US, there's a lot of these religious groups and stuff, and that's cool, like on native lands, and they do it. But a lot of them are still operating illegally. Like it's one of those things where like it's a state allowance, but it's not a federal, and all this kind of, it's just confusing. So, and it's not fully embraced. So if you end up in an ER somewhere, there's probably going to be trouble for the facilitators in the place you went if you're in the US, right? So it's not accepted yet. And it's going to be a tough one in the US to get it accepted. But I'm seeing open-mindedness everywhere. I'm seeing open-mindedness globally because I'm talking to all these different governments. They are really excited about this.
For people who want to learn more about what you're doing, are there certain resources that you would value over others, or what's the best way to get it straight from the source?
Well, there's a couple ways. So we're on social media. So we have a Facebook page, Rhythmia. It's easy to find. And we're on Instagram, of course. And we have a website, just rhythmia.com. And on there's a scholarship application for those that can't afford it. I wouldn't call it like super expensive, but it's not cheap. The average price is about $7,000 for the week. It's about $1,000 a night is like the average price. Mm-hmm. And so some people can't afford that. So we want everybody who wants to come to Rhythmia to be able to. And so we have an application that they can fill out for a full scholarship. And every week we have people that are there on scholarship.
Yeah, that's always one of the challenges, especially with communities that are dealing with active addiction. I mean, there's so much addiction associated with abject poverty in the United States and mental health and the whole cycle of poverty.
Definitely.
So hopefully as we learn more and our structures learn more, become more enlightened, and our caring and sense of care develops over time, hopefully, we can make modalities more widely available. Right now, I understand that it takes a certain amount of resources in order to obtain a certain amount of resources.
Yeah.
But it's good to know that there's a scholarship program in place.
That's right. Yeah, it's wonderful.
Dr. Jeff, thank you for joining me for today's edition of Mindbend. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.